We act like our choices are deliberate, but most of what we do is guided by a quiet, persistent inner belief about who we are and what we can do, and that belief steers conversations, risks, and relationships without asking permission. Think about the last time you stayed quiet in a meeting. If you ever told yourself, "First, I'm not ready," or "They won't take me seriously," that line became a rule you follow, so opportunities pass by while someone else gets the role you could have had. Remember turning down something because it felt risky. One offhand comment from a coach, teacher, or parent can harden into a belief that you replay at every decision point, so you choose safety and the world responds by offering fewer options. This matters because beliefs can be noticed and tested. By spotting the belief, naming it, and trying one small move against it, saying the idea aloud, applying for that job, or letting yourself fail, you change what you do first, and then your decisions and outcomes start to bend. In the next few minutes, you'll see clear examples and a simple practice you can use tonight to shift the script that runs your choices. A moment that revealed my hidden rule. The meeting felt ordinary until my mouth moved faster than my thoughts. Someone asked if First could take the client call that afternoon, and before First registered the workload on my plate, First had already said yes. A small flare of warmth followed, quick praise, a colleague's grateful nod, and First smiled back without thinking. That instant, quiet and ordinary, pulled a thread in me that First hadn't noticed before. My pattern was easier to see once First looked for examples. First would jump in to fix a teammate's slide the night before a presentation, skip my own lunch to handle last-minute edits, and volunteer for extra shifts when projects ran late. Each time there was an immediate positive reaction, relief from others, thanks, and a brief sense of being needed. Over weeks and months, those moments stacked up and made saying yes feel like the normal thing to do. The cost showed up later and in concrete ways. Quality dropped because my attention was split. First forgot details in my own deliverables and had to redo them. First missed a weekend plan with a friend because First had promised to cover another person's work, and the resentment that crept in made the gratitude from others feel hollow. Those outcomes made it impossible to pretend this was just generosity. A tiny physical cue finally gave it away. First noticed my throat tightening and my hands clenching whenever someone asked for help. That pause, awkward and brief, let me hear what First had been doing automatically, protecting myself from disappointing others at the cost of my own priorities. The realization changed the way First listened in the next conversation, and the difference in my own mood afterward was immediate and unmistakable. The quiet stories we run without checking. Small choices, saying no to a dinner, letting someone else lead a meeting, ignoring an opening in a job post, often come from stories we've already told ourselves. Those stories are quiet, like a narrator in the background, and they don't get checked. For example, a person who thinks First am not interesting will decline social invites and then feel lonelier, which feels like proof that the story was right. The effect is cumulative. Small withdrawals make bigger patterns. Many of those stories begin with a single comment or one repeated message. A teacher who said math isn't for you, or a parent who compared siblings can leave a short sentence stuck in someone's head. People who hear you're shy once will behave in ways that look shy, and others will treat them as shy, which reinforces the label. Because the story is simple and easy to repeat, it becomes the default explanation for new situations. Those narratives survive because the mind looks for confirming evidence and ignores the rest. If someone believes they're bad at presentations, they'll replay the 2 awkward moments and forget the 3 times the room leaned in. Selective memory and attention do the work. The result is a self-fulfilling loop. Avoiding practice keeps ability flat, and lack of practice feels like more proof that the original story was true. People actually test these things all the time, but not always deliberately. One person accepts one dinner invitation and discovers the group is easy to talk to, so their private script softens. Another volunteers to give a 2-minute update and hears useful feedback instead of ridicule, which shifts their internal dialogue. Small experiments like that change the kind of evidence the mind collects, and new evidence nudges the story into a different shape. The quiet stories matter because they steer bigger decisions without much fanfare. Assuming a partner is distant and then withdrawing will create the exact distance you feared. Believing you don't belong at work stops you from pitching ideas and makes you invisible in meetings. Over months, those unchecked scripts rewrite career paths and relationships. Little, concrete moments of counter-evidence add up and rewrite the script more reliably than big declarations ever do. How evidence and habit shape what we believe. Repeated exposure makes things feel true. When the same story, image, or statistic keeps popping up, people treat it like reliable evidence. That feeling happens because familiarity reduces the mental effort needed to accept a claim, and the brain uses ease as a cue for truth. A friend forwarding the same health tip, a feed algorithm resurfacing a meme, and a coworker telling the same explanation every week all push a point from possible into plausible. The cause is simple. Repetition breeds fluency, and fluency feels like proof even when the underlying data are thin. Daily routines quietly sort which evidence matters and which is ignored. If your morning habit is skimming a particular news source, you'll notice stories that fit its frame and overlook ones that don't. That filtering shapes belief because attention determines what gets encoded and what doesn't. Unattended contradictions evaporate. Think of a manager who habitually values early arrivals. He will file late explanations away as excuses, while seeing punctuality as a sign of competence, so his decisions reward one trait and reinforce his judgment. Contradictory evidence often collides with habit and produces resistance or slow change. When a new fact threatens a comfortable routine, people either reinterpret the fact to fit existing patterns or change the routine incrementally. This is why someone who's always driven to work might dismiss a commuter app showing faster transit routes at first, but after 1 week of saved time they might try the bus once and keep it if it eases their commute. Small behavioral experiments reduce the mental gap between old habit and new evidence. Habits can also transform flimsy signals into meaningful proof through repeated action. Performing a behavior repeatedly creates internal feedback, less cognitive dissonance, more ease, and a rising sense of identity around that action. A colleague who starts bringing a reusable mug because the office makes disposables hard to find will, over time, begin to think of herself as environmentally conscious. The change in belief follows the change in behavior because the sensory and social cues around the habit keep supplying corroborating evidence. The interplay between habit and evidence means environments matter more than arguments. Clear, consistent cues, visible bins for recycling, a dashboard that tracks small wins, routines that surface alternative viewpoints, turn isolated facts into a stream of confirming signals. As those signals accumulate, they bias attention and interpretation, and belief shifts along with behavior. In practice, that's why shifting what's easy to do often reshapes what people accept as true. When beliefs turn into self-fulfilling actions. Walking into a room convinced you won't be heard already changes your behavior. Your voice tightens, answers shorten, and you stop raising points you once thought mattered. That pullback signals to others that you don't expect to contribute, and so they stop inviting you into the conversation. The result looks like proof. You behave like someone who wouldn't be noticed, and the room treated you accordingly. A boss who doubts a team member's motivation often communicates that doubt without meaning to. Fewer check-ins, less challenging assignments, and a colder tone all register as lowered expectations. People respond to those cues by doing just enough to avoid trouble, not by taking risks or showing initiative. The cycle builds. The manager sees quieter results and feels justified in giving less support, which produces quieter results again, a familiar pattern known in psychology as the Pygmalion effect. When you tell yourself that others will let you down, your interactions start to create that reality. Suspicion shows up as checking messages, rereading old texts, and testing loyalty with probing questions. The other person feels judged and pulls away. What began as an inner script of distrust becomes the behavior that produces distance, and that distance then reinforces the original suspicion. Some people break this loop by changing small, observable acts and watching the feedback. Saying a brief, honest sentence in a meeting and noticing a nod. Letting a teammate handle a task and watching them succeed. Those tiny changes change how others respond, and those responses tweak the original belief. It doesn't erase a deep-seated idea overnight, but shifting actions changes the social signals you receive, which in turn nudges the belief towards something different. The interaction is circular. Belief guides action. Action shapes the world updates belief. Simple tests to change the belief that guides you. People often rely on a single guiding belief when they make choices, and that belief usually goes untested. It becomes the shorthand for deciding whether to say yes, to apply, or to try something new. Confirmation bias then does the work. We notice the moments that fit the belief and forget the rest. For example, someone who thinks first I'm not cut out for leadership will skip volunteering to lead a small project, then use the absence of experience as proof that the belief was right. Testing a belief can feel risky, even when the stakes are small. Behavioral experiments used in cognitive behavioral therapy work this way. You form a clear prediction tied to a specific action, try it, and compare the outcome to the prediction. So if the belief is first always mess up emails, a simple test might be sending one short, neutral message to a trusted colleague and seeing how they respond. If the response is constructive or neutral, that single data point begins to weaken the absolute claim embedded in the belief. Social beliefs are especially sticky because they're reinforced in real time by other people's reactions. A practical, low-cost test here is to share a brief idea in a meeting or ask for feedback on a small piece of work and watch what happens. The cause and effect are straightforward. If you expect ridicule and instead get useful suggestions, the surprise forces a reassessment. Another concrete approach is to run a small A/B test. Post 2 versions of the same update on a professional network and compare which one gets comments or shares. There's no magic number needed, just observable differences. One test rarely changes everything, so patterns matter more than single outcomes. Repeated low-stakes experiments create a record. Response rates, types of feedback, how comfortable you felt afterward. These measurable cues help separate ambiguous results from meaningful trends. Be mindful of interpretation traps. An offhand negative comment doesn't erase a string of supportive ones, and a single success doesn't prove a global truth. But when several small tests point the same way, the belief that guides you will naturally shift. You ever catch yourself making the same choice and wonder why? You skip the meeting because a quiet voice says you won't be heard. You don't apply because a memory says you won't fit. You rehearse apologies for things you haven't done. Those moments add up. The core idea here is simple. Inner beliefs shape what you notice, which changes how you feel, and that in turn steers your decisions. We looked at how those beliefs form, how they get reinforced by what you pay attention to, and how small, real-world experiments can provide the corrective evidence needed to change the script. Sometimes the origin is embarrassingly small. One offhand comment from a teacher, a strict parent who doubled down on a fear, a first failed attempt. Those concrete moments become reference points that bias every similar situation afterward. Because you expect failure, you look for it, and because you look for it, your choices make that outcome more likely, which then reinforces the belief. That feedback loop is the mechanics behind why an inside line of thinking becomes an outside pattern of behavior. Changing it doesn't have to be dramatic. A single small win, asking one question in a meeting, finishing a short workout, sending a short email, gives your brain concrete evidence the old story was incomplete, and over time those wins change what you expect and therefore what you do. Often people who shift these beliefs notice assumptions, run tiny experiments, and let the responses slowly update the narrative. The cause and effect is straightforward. New evidence adjusts expectations, and adjusted expectations change decisions. It can feel risky. Trying something different opens the possibility of embarrassment or disappointment, but those small setbacks also provide the very data that disproves exaggerated beliefs, so the risk becomes useful information rather than a final verdict on who you are. Most of us undervalue that trade-off. If you're watching because an inner voice still shapes choices you regret, there's a real relief in knowing awareness reduces its power and steady evidence rebuilds it. If this landed with you, there are more stories and practical examples coming. Case studies of people who shifted careers, short mental experiments to test limiting ideas, and conversations with people who've rewritten their expectations, and they will show the same pattern in different lives. You don't have to change everything at once. If you'd like to explore further, the next video goes deeper into small, practical tests you can try soon, and sharing a moment in the comments often sparks conversations that others find useful too. This isn't about fixing yourself overnight. The inner belief is both the lens and the lever. It filters what you see and also responds when you introduce new evidence. So small, consistent experiments gradually tilt choices toward the person you want to become. It takes time. People who change tend to gather those small pieces of evidence and let them alter the decisions that add up into a different life.